Hey, friends, I am joined today by the ever controversial, ever popular Milo Yiannopoulos. You may have heard him in the news more in the past. What's happened? What's going on with him being deplatformed? What does he really believe? Where is he being falsely accused? We're going to have a constructive, honest discussion. But it's important, as so many of my listeners are evangelical Christians, that I remind you that when I had a previous interview with Milo, we discussed lots of issues that we were in harmony with in terms of conservative values, etc. Of course, the contradiction being that Milo is a practicing homosexual and yet finds a contradiction between that and his Catholic faith. So, of course, I sent him "Can You Be Gay and Christian? A Queer Thing Happened to America." He fully understands my views and my viewpoint. We're not here to discuss that, nor am I here to preach to him. He knows my views and the differences we have in the areas of harmony. We're here to discuss other things, but I want to say that up front, because otherwise somebody's like, how come you're not yelling at him? He needs to repent. So we've discussed things. He knows my
I do not
viewpoints.
yelling at myself, trust me.
Okay. So Milo, thanks so much for joining us again on The Line of Fire.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So normally I give a whole bio and introduction, but just the name Milo says a lot these days. It wasn't that long ago that you had a book that was #1 on Amazon before it was even released, well before it was released, as soon as it was announced, that you were kind of everywhere, your voice was everywhere. Then the publisher drops you for allegations that you were pro-pedophile, obviously outrageous allegations. And then next thing, you're getting deplatformed left and right. Obviously, this was not an ego issue to you. You had a message you wanted to get out, but how's this affected you all personally? It's got to be a pretty intense experience to go through all this.
I think if I'd been alone, it would have been. It has helped having some emotional support at home. But honestly, I treat my career, I'm able to emotionally compartmentalize what I do, if you like, for work and what's real, what's, my friends, my family, my relationships. So it hasn't had the kind of unraveling effect on me that it has on some of my friends. Laura Loomer, for instance, is an investigative journalist and a stunt artist and prankster. And she's, I think people are pretty worried about her with some justification because of what's happened to her recently. I wouldn't say that it's had a tremendously emotional effect on me, but of course it has had an effect on my career and my profession. It doesn't matter what they identify as a BS explanation for, trying to deplatform you or reject you from public life. It's important that people understand those of us who have been systematically deplatformed, and this is all about the next election. This is all about, getting Trump back in again. Those of us who've been systematically deplatformed have been excluded from public life, not because we believe anything outrageous. Anytime you hear a quote that I'm supposed to have said, or something that I supposedly believe that shocks you, it's almost always a lie. We're deplatformed and we're excluded from public life because we're effective, because we're persuasive, because we convert people. That's what's really, truly dangerous, because we're political evangelists who speak and write and appear in public and convert people away from the sick madness of the Democrat Party, in droves by the thousand. And that's why we represent an especial risk to the progressive left. And it's why they've come for us before they've come for people who actually are right wing. I don't believe in, a white ethno state, but there are people who do. And those people are still on Twitter.
Yeah.
Richard Spencer, David Duke, these people are still on Twitter. They're allowed to operate their Twitter accounts without fear or favor, without worry. Because every time somebody sees one of those people, it's supposed to sort of cast the right in a negative light. It serves the left to have Richard Spencer and David Duke out there who are unashamed racists and white nationalists and white supremacists, whereas those of us who are not, but who are very effective at getting people persuaded, or find ourselves banned. Gavin McInnes, Laura Loomer, Alex Jones, Milo Yiannopoulos. What do all these people have in common? A respectable, reasonable, center-right clutch of opinions and popularity. That's key to understanding what this is really about.
So, Milo, let me throw another name in the equation here. We get flack constantly because we take on the moral cultural issues, because we take on LGBT activism and militant abortionism. One day I woke up to discover, I think 1,200 or 900. I think it was 900 of our YouTube videos had gotten demonetized overnight. It's just like, well, what
Oh,
happened? And
I saw
yeah,
something about it.
and instantly, literally, this can go on for months. The moment the video goes live, instantly, it can be Dr. Brown answers your Bible questions. Dr. Brown
Yeah,
wishes you a nice day. The
yeah.
instant it gets flagged. It's like, what
Yes.
is it getting flagged for? And then we request review it. But anyway, so I mean, we're used to this going on, but thankfully we're still able to get our voice out and haven't been deplatformed. We just had a lot of battles to overcome. But let's add in another voice, Alex Jones. He's been deplatformed. I appreciate some of what he says, but he's way too conspiratorial for me. Where do you fit him in? Do you identify with the Alex Joneses of the world? Where, because you gave a list, Laura, Gavin,
Yeah,
etc.
yeah.
But
Well, Alex is a friend of mine. I think he's brilliant at what he does. I probably share the same views as you about his on-air performances. Some of it sounds great. The rest of it, I'd rather do without. But I think Alex is wonderful. There's certainly no justification whatsoever for nuking him off the platform. The way to understand Alex Jones and to understand InfoWars, and you as somebody who talks about religious issues will understand what I mean perhaps better than others. People always are asking, what is Alex Jones's deal? Does he really mean all this stuff, and is it all an act? Yes, he does mean it, and no, it's not an act. The best way to understand InfoWars is as a ministry. The best way to understand Alex Jones is as a preacher in that Southern style who uses very metaphoric and colorful language to describe the world that he sees around him. So when he talks about the Democrat Party being satanic, when he talks about, lesbians being demonic and all the rest of it, he's using a sort of heavy laden metaphoric language to describe something that he thinks is morally deplorable, let's say, or sick in some way. Now, he's not a man of great deep spiritual faith as you or I might understand it, but he's using the language of religion to describe morally things that he has identified as being corrupt, sick, corrosive, negative influences. And he's right about them all. I mean, there's a sort of political lesbianism in the, Democrats and gender studies departments in universities. He's not wrong about that.
right.
He's not wrong about a lot of this stuff. The language he uses sometimes puts people off more than his actual opinions. And that's what I think leads people to think that he's, a bit cuckoo. But he isn't. He's simply using the language of religion to pass moral judgment on things he sees as being corrosive to the American body politic and antithetical to the idea of America. And that seems to me to be entirely reasonable. It's obviously very persuasive. It's a very popular way of doing things. And if you understand him that way, I think he makes a little more sense. I think you can reckon with him a bit more comfortably if you understand that InfoWars isn't an online news channel, it's a ministry. And I think Alex is great and an essential part of the ecosystem.
Right. Now, when he was deplatformed, I immediately wrote an article, whether I agree or not. We're not going to repeat the Martin Niemöller poem from the Holocaust. They came after this one, and I didn't say anything. They came after that one, I didn't say anything. I said, when they're coming after Alex Jones, they're coming after me. They're coming after you. So I've been with you in that regard, despite differences I would have, especially a lot of the conspiratorial stuff and false flag stuff. But
sure.
The larger association question, this is something I want to dig into and try to sort through with you in terms of the intellectual dark web and the alt-right and anti-Semitism, etc. But just back on your end, so that those that don't know you up close and they just hear a rumor, you said this, you said that, what was the reason that you lost your book contract, and what would you like to set straight about the accusations against you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to spend a lot of time doing this because I think that the strategy of the left is to constantly put you on the back foot. So you waste 3/4 of every interview you do retreading ground when everybody knows the truth already. The people making the false allegations know it's not true. The people who like you know it's not true. But you have to go through this sort of excrucialy immiserating.
We'll make it quick. We'll make it real quick.
I've been the victim of clerical sexual abuse and have written a book about it and have made jokes about it because as is my want. That is my prerogative. If you don't like me making jokes about things that have happened to me, don't come to see me talk and don't buy my books. But it was falsely suggested from a few remarks that I made on a late night live stream years ago that I was somehow soft on child abuse or I was pro pedophilia or whatever. Nothing could be further from the truth. I'm a victim of it. This is a classic example of the sociopathy, the cruelty of the left that will take somebody on the receiving end of something and misrepresent them knowingly so as a proponent for that same crime, that same moral outrage. It is the most atrocious and disgusting imaginable tactic. It's appalling. And selectively edited videos which cut out where I say I think the age of consent is about right. I talk about a lot of edgy issues. I talk about sex, death, love, money, religion, politics, you name it. And I get into I get into thought experiments and devil's advocacy, on 4 or 5 hour live streams with people on YouTube. And it's not difficult to snatch a few quotes, jam them together and say, this guy's, pro anything. You could create, there are hundreds of hours of me talking about very delicate subjects over beers, at 3 a.m. with people on the internet. And it wouldn't be possible to construct a case that I was pro anything if you wanted. So it's garbage. Everyone knows it's garbage. The people who pretend it's true know it's garbage. The people who are angry about it know it's garbage. I know it's garbage. You know it's garbage. I don't like to waste any more time on false allegations.
Good enough. It would be similar to Trump in Charlottesville. They're good people on both sides, and he was saying that neo-Nazis were good people.
Never said it. Look at the transcript. And Trump is not the clearest communicator. He's a very effective communicator, but he's not the clearest in terms of, the precise use of language.
Exactly.
Lots of repetition and false starts and kind of like, he can be quite difficult to follow. He's like a stream kind of like dodging around rocks, on its way down the mountain. And you get a sense of the general trajectory, but sometimes the individual sentence, do you think, wait, does he mean what? But if you look at the paragraph, the transcript of the words that came out of his mouth, the meaning of them could not be any clearer.
Yep, I
and
agree.
Even I think I was Jake Tapper, was it, who recently admitted that Trump never said that there were good people among the white nationalists. CNN had claimed that was the case for years now. Finally, they slip out that they know it's not true. It's simply not true. And yet it's become something that even Republicans who don't like Trump, and even some people who do like Trump, now believe that he said and feel like they have to either make excuses for or condemn him for it. Fans of mine, people who adore me, believe things about me that are completely untrue. This is what happens when you're in the firing line of this demonic leftist.
Hey, listen, you can call it demonic here. I have a book coming out in August called Jezebel's War Against America. And I look at the Jezebel of the Bible, this radical feminist who emasculated men and was
it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting.
Tell you what, just hang on one second. We got a break and we'll come back. But yeah, I have no problem saying they're demonic forces at
they
work.
Are.
And
they are.
So anyway, we'll be right back and continue this conversation with Milo. Hey friends, this is Michael Brown speaking again with Milo Yiannopoulos. I'm so glad that he was able to take time to join us on the air today. If you just tuned in, go back to the beginning of the broadcast for my initial caveats and how you can hear that Milo preaches repentance to himself. We didn't get into that, but he was echoing that in the background. Milo, right before the break, I mentioned a book I have coming out in August called Jezebel's War with America. And I kind of connect the dots and say, hey, look, she was a woman who lived in the past 3,000 years ago. Jesus references a woman, false prophetess in the New Testament called Jezebel, probably just the name he gives her. And I said, look, the same demonic forces that operated through her are operating again today. Connect the dots from the rise of witchcraft to radical feminism to the emasculating of men and maleness to the silencing of the prophetic voices. And on and on. In ancient idolatry, baby killing was common, sacrificing a baby. You've got the militant abortion spirit, not a 15-year-old girl who's raped and is struggling and fearful, do I have an abortion or not? But we're talking about the shout your abortion, militant, celebrate this, pro-infanticide crowd, etc. So I connect the dots and say, there's demonic junk going on. It's not just earthly and natural. You wanted to weigh in on that.
I'm so glad that you are writing that book because I have something similar, related. Perhaps they'll be quite complementary to one another. I'm currently assembling my thoughts on feminism, which does contain basically everything boils down to abortion. It all boils down to this great invention of Christianity in the Middle Ages of the individual worth of the human being, of equality before God, which leads us into equality before the law, of the idea that we are, beings created in God's image and we're all of unique moral worth. And understanding that and why it's therefore impossible to support abortion, it's impossible to support the death penalty as much as we might want it for some people. This is the basic, societal innovation of Christianity all throughout the West. And where they don't have Christianity, of course, women are still oppressed. Other people are thrown off roofs and people shoot each other over minor disagreements. It all boils down to this is why it all boils down to abortion. That's why abortion is the central and most important issue politically in the US, because it's the most important issue for humanity. It's the most important issue there is. Do human beings have intrinsic moral worth or not? And the left doesn't believe that they do. The left does not believe that people have intrinsic moral worth, mainly because so many of them, don't feel that way about themselves. This social justice warrior psychology, these damaged individuals with incredibly low self-esteem, who generalize from the particular and invent this entire political system based on their own, in some cases, quite justified self-loathing. So my next book's about feminism. The one after that is going to be about why women are so unhappy. And it focuses on witchcraft. You of course will know that 1.3, 1.4 million Americans now describe themselves as Wiccans. That's more than there are Presbyterians.
Exactly.
This is a sign of women who've given up on God, given up on the family, and given up on motherhood. Given up on the prospect of. I just saw a tweet today from a dreadful woman who writes, I think, for the Daily Beast. Her name is Taylor Lorenz. She's the one who was responsible for doxing Pamela Geller's children and putting them in the crosshairs of the jihadists. And she's tweeting today about, why don't shows like The Bachelor have women of over 30 or over 40 looking for love? And I'm like, the regret setting in, isn't it, pumpkin? These are women who have chosen to forswear, love, babies, a husband, marriage, the home, all of the things that make women happy. Instead, for this kind of nebulous, empty nothing of a media career in New York, guaranteeing that they're going to be miserable and that they're gonna die, unfulfilled and unable to realize their potential. And so I'm seeing this happen everywhere. And the rise of witchcraft is really just a symbol of this. And it's women
it is
giving up on the family, motherhood. I'm so glad you're writing this. I can't wait to read your book because I think yours is going to come out before mine does. So I'm sure I'll lean on it heavily.
I'll gladly send you the PDF. We'll get it to you because
what you're writing about is fundamental to the clash of ideologies between the left and the right in this country. And this is why abortion is everything, because from that question, from that subject, spring all of the other critical questions about how we should treat one another, what the proper roles and what the proper extent of the state should be, how we should organize society, what our approach to waging war should be. Everything flows from that one central question. When you give up, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I found it extraordinary that Mayor Pete. I use Mayor Pete because I always mispronounce his last name, which is also why I just use Milo in your case. But in any case, with Mayor Pete, remarkably, as he was attacking Mike Pence's Christianity and Donald Trump's Christianity. Okay, I understand how he could attack Donald Trump's Christianity and how Christian is he, et cetera, and is he a work in progress. But he refused to make a statement about late-term abortion, but then pointed to one of his favorite verses in Scripture, Matthew 25, when Jesus talks about caring for the least of these, which he then applies to illegal immigrants. It's like, hang on, you have a heart for illegal immigrants, some of whom are criminals and shouldn't be here, and Mexico doesn't want either. You have a heart for them, but you won't even make a statement about late-term abortion. And you have, right now, I live in North Carolina. The governor of North Carolina refused to sign a bill that if a baby is born alive, that it gets medical care. Well, that's already on the book. Well, then sign it. So the culture of death that we have, when Mother Teresa years ago made the comment that when women kill their own children in the womb, how much lower can you get than that? When it's celebrated, it's a whole other issue. So yeah, the radical feminism, which then wants to make men into women and women into men, and includes the war on gender, the seductive spirit of Jezebel. So pornography, which also destroys humanity and makes women just into sex objects and makes men degradable in their own eyes, on and on and on. These things are certainly interconnected. And where it goes the way of death. It doesn't reproduce, it doesn't bring life, it doesn't enhance another generation. And once again, a recent survey repeated the results of previous surveys that religious married women were the happiest of all with their sex lives and in
Yes,
general.
they
This
call
has happened
themselves
for
Catholics.
decades. No surprise.
Always true. Also, of course, every survey that comes out shows that Republicans and Republicans or right-leaning people in general are massively better looking. They're much more physically attractive because they and this is not as frivolous or as flippant as it sounds. It's because those of us who have an appreciation, understanding for, reverence for institution, for religion, for the family, understand also the importance of beauty and truth and joy and these central Christian virtues that have made the West a nice place to live. And we have we know that there are objective beauty standards for men just like there are for women, and that they change a little over time, but not that dramatically. Sort of okay, yes, the ideal womanly shape has grown and shrunk, gently oscillated over time in the West, but it's never been Lena Dunham. And it's this loss of appreciation for beauty and truth and joy, these central Christian virtues that is part of the problem there, the uglification of the world. And that's what my Feminism as Cancer book is going to be about. Chesterton Chesterton in Orthodoxy says that suicide is the greatest kind of crime anyone can commit, because it's not like killing one person; you're effectively killing the world. You're unmaking your entire world. It's like you're murdering the whole universe by killing yourself. I don't know if he's quite right about that. I think abortion might be a step further, because you're killing a part of you that hasn't the wherewithal, the ability to fight back. It's a sort of self-abnegation of even worse kind, because of the murdered potential, of that life that is part of you. It seems to me that in the abstract, it's a nice theological point about suicide, about it being the greatest crime because you're sort of killing the world. But in real moral terms, actually, you are murdering your own potential and future.
Yeah, and you're making the choice and imposing the choice, and violently so, on someone that's innocent and expecting it should be the safest place in the world is a mother's womb.
Which is your own future. It is your own potential. It is your own legacy.
Yeah.
And people, I think, who have phenomenally low self-esteem, who see no value in themselves, see perhaps no value in their own legacy, in their own future, in their own potential, and therefore, and also, of course, because there's this extraordinary strain of sociopathy on the left, I think, and it's a natural consequence of not having faith, not having respect for the family, and not having true proper love for other people, which can only come from the realization that other people are made in the image of God, have individual worth, right? If you don't believe that, I guess it's quite easy to just to fool yourself into the clump of cells thing and just say, yes, doctor, suck it out. Excuse the phrase, but that's what they're doing. Sell the parts off for scrap. This kind of sociopathic, like jaw-droppingly horrendous attitude to life is the natural consequence of not treating other human beings as people with intrinsic worth and value. And you can see that woman that I mentioned earlier, Taylor Lorenz, who's now kind of regretting her life choices, the ease with which, and even the glibness and worse than that, the gloating after she'd outed Pamela Geller's daughters, said, oh, these women that are famous on Instagram, did you know their mother is, Islamophobic, crazy Pamela Geller, trying to get these kids in trouble, trying to get them fired, trying in the most unspeakably awful way to drive a wedge between mother and daughters. And she must have done enough research to know that the kid's dad is dead, right? So she's been bringing Pamela's been bringing her children up alone. They are incredibly close and tight, but they have always been scrupulous about not identifying, one another in public to keep everybody safe. And the sort of gloating with which Taylor Lorenz is sort of like carving up families bragging about having outed this because somebody has a slightly different ideological opinion about whatever. This is the mind of somebody who kills children, who stays unmarried, who suddenly wakes up one day at the age of 35 and says, "Oh my goodness, what have I done? What have I done with my life?" Well, you asked for this. You brought this on yourself. So I don't shed tears for people like that, although I believe that there's, of course, redemption available for everybody. I don't shed tears for her wasted life and opportunity because she had every available chance she had every, I mean, this is a rich girl from Connecticut. She had every bit of data in front of her. She had all the resources possible to make the right choice. And she consistently, studiously and deliberately made the wrong choice.
I got to jump in. I'm studiously, deliberately jumping in. We got a break. We'll be right back with Milo. Hey, Fritz, thanks for joining us today on a special edition of The Line of Fire. I'm speaking with the outspoken Milo Yiannopoulos. I could make this the easiest interview of my life. I could ask Milo a question and come back 20 or 30 or 40 minutes later, go out, make myself a salad, come back, and he'd still be weighing in, but articulate.
I do that. I'm sorry.
No. Listen, I do interviews.
It's all good stuff, I promise.
Yeah, I do interviews not infrequently, and sometimes you get kind of the yes, no type answers. So it's delightful to speak with Milo, who has so much to offer. And one day, sir, we'll get to sit down face to face and talk. That would be a delight. You can drink beer. I'll drink sparkling water, and we can talk face to face.
We have no fear of alcohol, sir.
Got it. All right. Yeah, that's a whole other subject. Catholic, Protestant, etc. That's a whole other subject. And Milo, again, for those just tuning in, Milo does have in his possession. I don't know if you ever read it. My book, Can You Be Gay and Christians? But we're not focused on that issue today. Okay, just for a caveat for all those just joining us, Milo, I'm no expert on your writings and speaking, but I've heard you enough, and one of my colleagues really follows you closely. I've never heard you say anything that would hint at anything anti-Semitic in any way, or that you could even be accused of it as much as you get falsely accused. I think of you as a friend of Israel, despite the liberal Jewish influence on the radical left. I've never heard you bless Jews in a generalized way because of that. And yet here's a concern I want to put out for you and get your thinking on. There are those that are centrist right, and then they go further to alt-right. And some of them are associated, alt-right, of course, well associated with anti-Semitism, but some that you would say centrist right, or folks you associate with, who freely associate with others who have strongly anti-Semitic views. Now, this is not guilt by association. Someone will say to me, why do you work with such and such a publisher? They publish your book by so-and-so. It's like, well, they publish my book. That's what I stand for. I can't account for everyone that publishes. But say your friend Vox Day, you wrote a foreword to his book on Jordanetics that came out in November. He's now got a platform, unauthorized.tv, together with Owen Benjamin. And I've challenged Owen Benjamin's recent virulent anti-Semitism, extraordinary statements being made that to me are very dangerous. There are others that Owen Benjamin is working with, E. Michael Jones, Catholic scholar I've had on my show, and we've had some very, very deep, serious differences. I'm not holding you responsible for any of that. I'm not holding you responsible for.
No, but I'm happy to talk.
Yeah, but I want to get clarity, because there is something that I'm seeing rising up, a fresh wave of anti-Semitism, some of it in Christian garb, some of it in its classical, more secular forms. And it seems to be on some of the sides where otherwise I'd agree with the conservative positions. And again, with your association with Vox Day and him just with Owen Benjamin on his platform, I think it's worth discussing. I don't feel like it's just some rabbit, chasing a rabbit somewhere.
No, look, I'm happy to talk about it. So you're friends with so-and-so, or you've worked with so-and-so, or you are, have been partners with so-and-so, who's friends with so-and-so. This is a level of, everybody's guilty by that metric, right? By that standard. And I don't think it's a particularly useful way to go about anything. I will agree with you that I've been very disturbed by some of the things that I've seen on Owen Benjamin's social media feeds. And it seems to me like a sort of this runaway train where, first of all, he was just taboo breaking because, of course, for the left, they've got, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia. On the right, you might argue that anti-Semitism is a similar kind of taboo. And if, for Gen Z, for, post-millennial generation, by the way, since when did the left care about anti-Semitism in Israel? Never, until they could use it to beat Trump, despite the fact that his daughter is a Jew now, and his son-in-law, it's crazy.
And his grandchildren, at one point, all of his adult children were either married to Jews or dating Jews.
Insane.
Right.
But suddenly the left has decided it cares about anti-Semitism. All right, nice one, guys. Look, I've been invited to go on with Owen Benjamin, and I have declined on his, live streams and all the rest of it, because I don't like a lot of what I see over there. But that to me personally is no basis on which not to do business with mutual friends. There's probably things about Vox Vox's opinions that you wouldn't like either, and I don't care whether you like that or not either. I'm responsible for what I say, and I'm responsible for what I do. And if I incite people into ugly thoughts about others, then I'm responsible for that. If I incite people into violence, I'm responsible for that. I'm not responsible for anything that anybody else does. If you want to, look, the guy that just shot up I can't even remember what he shot up now. Some shooter said, he was radicalized against Jews by Breitbart and Ben Shapiro. And it's like, suddenly now we're blaming Ben Shapiro for anti-Semitism. It's just crazy. The fact is that people don't get radicalized by people on their own side. You don't get pushed to the far right by people in the center right like me. You get pushed to the far right by looking at the behavior of the far left. Feminists create men's rights activists, not me. This is a central. This is just such an obvious fact that doesn't even seem to occur to anybody that it hardly bears repeating. But it must be said, because people don't seem to realize this. You do not become a far-right, white ethno-state, Jew-hating, alt-right monster because you listen to Milo and Candace Owens. You become that because you look at the behavior of the far left and you seek to invert it and to become its opposite. And you seek to beat it by imitating it and becoming a mirror image of it. Right?
Got it.
So if you see the insane behavior of secular Jews in media, and people have written entire books about why American Jews are work in so consistently against their own interests,
right?
Against the interests of Israel, the rest of it. People have written entire books on that. I'm not qualified to go to wander into that subject, except to join millions of people in observing the phenomenon. But if you observe that on the left, then of course you're going to want to tease and needle and prick these people in whatever way works. And for Generation Z, who have never met anyone who was alive during the Second World War or thereafter, in the Holocaust or in the immediate aftermath, the Holocaust is the Shoah, if you like, is an abstract concept that doesn't really speak to them any more directly than the French Revolution does. And when they see,
just to jump in. Also, with a lot of the social justice warrior crowd, there is a healthy desire to stand with those that are perceived to be victims or outcasts. It goes in extreme ways. It goes in unhealthy ways.
Jewish. But, all the ringleaders.
But what happens?
This is what the right is what the far right is reacting against. I don't think it comes out of any sort of deep-seated hatred of the Jewish people rooted in historical prejudice. I think they're just looking out at a corrupt, sick media, a corrupt, sick entertainment industry, a corrupt, sick news business, and are correctly identifying that Jews, and I'm matrilineally speaking Jewish. My mother was a Jew. I was raised Catholic. I consider myself Catholic, but technically, according to Jewish law, I am Jewish too. So why we, let's say, are hugely overrepresented in those industries.
Right.
Why?
There's no
IQ, our extraordinary natural abilities. That's why we have so many Nobel Prizes. Whatever. It is nonetheless true to say we are overrepresented in those industries. And I think this young wing of the far right, let's say, is looking out on it and saying, well, every single person I see with a blue check mark on Twitter saying totally bonkers things always seems to be Jewish.
Right.
Why is that?
Right.
Now,
in ACLU or Southern Poverty Law Center, et cetera, these different groups.
Right. And it's not an unreasonable question to
ask.
Right.
Now, and it's nothing anti-Semitic. to ask the question. Just the
No,
point
no,
I was going to make was that the social justice warriors, they'll often, you were mentioning that Holocaust is distant and World War II is distant. So
I think
even
so.
the birthing of Israel out of the ashes of the Holocaust and how miraculous that was and how
They
tiny
don't
Israel,
remember
how
that.
could it even survive? That's all past. That what they're
Right.
conscious of is, in their mind, Israel is the bully and the Palestinians are the victims. And it's not to say that everything Israel does is right, but that adds in. So you've got the anti-Israel narrative.
Well,
And
we're mixing up generations here, I think, because for the millennials, they're very pro-Palestine.
exactly
For them, Israel's a bully,
right,
and Israel is a proxy for all the things they don't like about America.
right.
But for Generation Z underneath them, they seem not to like Israel very much either, but for a bit of a different reason.
Oh
They
no,
don't.
I understand. It all blends. Here, look. Just so you know, my thesis is that God called the Jewish people to be world changers. When we get things right, whether it be a Moses or an Isaiah or a Jesus or a Paul, it has this extraordinarily powerful impact. When we get things wrong, be it a Karl Marx or a George Soros or someone else, it gets really wrong.
Has a
And
big impact too, you know.
yeah, it has a big impact for bad. And again, you mentioned disproportionate number of Nobel Prize winners, but you also have disproportionate number of musicians and disproportionate number of comedians and
Of
so on and so
course,
forth.
of
And
course.
there's nothing anti-Semitic about asking this or discussing it.
I
So
don't think so. And the other thing you got to bear in mind is this Generation Z. They grew up trolls, and this is why I have such an affinity with them. They're mischief makers by nature because they're creatures of the internet, and they're looking for taboos to smash. And perhaps the last one in public life in America still is anti-Semitism, because I think they do correctly identify that sometimes, not all the time, not most of the time, but sometimes, anti-Semitism or allegations of anti-Semitism are deployed to cut off debate, to stop people asking questions, to shoo people away from awkward and inconvenient facts, whether it is something that Israel did that was probably a bit much, or whatever it is, right? I mean, I'm probably the last unreconstructed Zionist in the Western Hemisphere, but I'm about as pro-Israel as it's possible to get. But let's say if you were to say something like, well, maybe that was a bit of an overreaction, and probably in PR terms, it might not be good to do such and such. It's like, oh, this is just
oh yeah, no, I'm going to jump in just because
you-
I've got a break coming up, and
Sure.
then we'll get back to your comments. But let me just say this: having written a book and came out in '92 and it's been continuously in print ever since, about to revise and update it in September. Our Hands Are Stained with Blood, which looks at anti-Semitism in church history and then in secular society. It is extraordinary. Now that I've confronted some contemporary anti-Semites, and I'm doing it as a Jewish follower of Jesus, the level of vile attacks. I mean, I get them all the time, like you do, and the death wishes and the this and that. But the amount that it just suddenly everybody comes out of the woodwork from all different angles, and what brings them in common, black supremacists, white supremacists, what unites them is Jew hatred. And so, sure, anti-Semitism can be overused, and there can be an overreaction. You can criticize Israel without being anti-Semitic. You can criticize the actions of liberal Jews without being anti-Semitic. But there is this. To me, it is quite demonic.
There is a lot of it, but I will say in many cases that these people are 17-year-olds in their bedroom, motivated as much by trolling and the idea of breaking and upsetting people as the contents of what they're actually saying. As much, 50-50, maybe more, maybe a lot more. I would argue a lot more, but at least 50-50.
All right, we'll be right back. Hey, friends, I'm speaking with Milo Yiannopoulos. This is the second time he's been on the line of fire with me. What I found fascinating with all of my strong biblical stands about homosexuality and things like that when Milo was on the first time, I saw a lot of comments. Oh, two of my favorite guys, two of my favorite thinkers. So obviously the areas that unite us and the concerns that we have, and even with that, the Christian perspective come across loudly and clearly, which is quite fascinating. So Milo's been deplatformed. He has suffered unjustly in terms of unfair treatment and people just trying to ban his voice. But obviously, Milo's still here and still moving forward. So what's next for you personally and professionally?
I think the tolerance of your audience, by the way, speaks to their suppressed secret inner Catholicism, recognizing that we're all fallen and broken and imperfect, and that this is why evangelical Americans felt comfortable voting for Donald Trump, because they knew they weren't voting for heaven on earth. That's a Marxist false promise.
But by the way, that's Bible. Fallen man, that's Bible, not Catholic. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, I'm talking
no.
about
Go ahead. I know. Just messing up.
Being able to overlook something really quite huge and see that there is value to be found in a contradictory and imperfect person or whatever. I mean, this is the root of the difference between Protestants and Catholics. Is what's that evil and worth? Is it you guys go to church because you think you're good people, and we go because we know we're not. There's this little inner hidden shard of Catholic tolerance in your audience, clearly. I am sort of leading the charge now with my friends Laura Loomer and Alex and Paul Joseph Watson, trying to persuade them all to completely abandon social media. Whatever they haven't been banned from so far, just leave anyway. Clearly, social media is not for us. It's not for conservatives. We made a huge strategic error handing over distribution and amassing our audience on platforms owned by people who are dedicated to our annihilation, who want to see us, forgive the expression, pushed into the sea, who want to see us completely annihilated, who want to see our values driven from the public square, and want to see us dead in the case of Antifa, which is the military wing of CNN. Now, what I want to do is for us to bring our content and our work back on our own platforms and our own technology, and that means not wasting all of our best stuff on clever and funny tweets or throwaway nonsense, but writing books, documentaries, doing shows. So I'm going to be writing a big book every year from now on. The one this year is called Feminism is Cancer, my famous phrase that I came up with in 2015-16, which got me in. That's when my card was marked from that point, So that's my big book. It's going to be a handbook for young men in how to spot and deal with women who are getting misled by this poisonous and diabolical ideology. And then the second one, the year after that, is provisionally titled Damaged: Why Women Are So Unhappy. And it's going to go in, as we discussed earlier in the show, to witchcraft and childlessness and all the rest of the bad decisions that women are making and the effects that has on everybody, on the rest of us. I'm also I'm just in the process of closing funding for a new weekly late night chat show, which is going to be my version of, let's say, a Johnny Carson show, using my, characters and stand-up comedy and interviews and all the rest of it for a sort of hour long. It's kind of like the show that HBO would have if HBO wasn't mental, that's the way I like to think about it. Sort of the funniest, best, center-right Christian capitalist, pro property rights, blah blah blah, but with a sort of Trumpian populist nationalist kind of sense of humor and waspishness.
Well, I've got a question. Well, I imagine it's going to be kind of R-rated. In other words, would I be allowed to be a guest?
Yes.
Would I be allowed to be a guest even if I refuse to use profanity? Would I be allowed on?
There will be lots of, well, not lots, but there will be the occasion. Let's put it like this: if things slip out, they slip out. So some of your audience will want to, watch with a 5-minute delay and hands over the ears. But their kids will love it, and it will save many of their children from the worst. But this is, again, this is take the rough with the smooth. This is being a Catholic, have this easy get out like that. Now, that's what I'm up to. So it's going to be lots of fun. I'm writing a big.
Are there new social media platforms or other type platforms that you're aware of that you don't have to divulge it, but that are developing as outlets?
There are a couple. I mean, the Trump campaign is saying they're going to try Parlay, and I'm on Telegram now. But the problem is every time you move your audience, you get this massive attrition. I mean, right. I had 2.3 million people on Facebook, 850,000 I still have on YouTube for as long as I have that, 400,000 on Instagram. Every time you move, you lose like 3/4 of the audience, right? So eventually you're moving from minor platform to minor platform, keeping 20 people with you. Mm-hmm. No. What we have to do is pull our audience in, email lists and our own websites, and it was back to the good old days of the Yahoo directory. You want to see what Milo's up to, you have to go to his website, to go to dangerous.com and see what Milo's up to. Conservatives are just going to have to work a bit harder than they're typically used to doing to find the stuff that they want, and that's just the way it is. So I'm retooling my enterprise and operation and business model and all the rest of it at the moment to take account of that fact, and working with the others in the movement to get everybody on board as well. So we're my new show, I'm going to ask people not to share it on social media. Banned from sharing it on social media. Please do not. If you're desperate to share this wonderful, hilarious content with somebody, send them an email about it, or buy them a subscription. That please do not share anything I do on social media. I beg you. If you're a fan, if you love me, stay away from Twitter. It's quite a ballsy thing to do. It means the growth will be slower in the early days, but the audience you do retain will be real, and they'll be yours, and they'll be friends, and they'll be supporters, and and that's something that people cannot take away from you. We've got to become, as they say on the internet, anti-fragile. We've got to have a sustainable, repeatable business model that enables us to get our message out and to sell people books, but also to just talk to them.
Do you ever do debates? Would you like to do a Catholic versus Protestant debate one day?
I would love to do that. I think I might be a little intellectually outclassed doing it with you, but I am always up for a challenge. So I will say yes now and get reading immediately. But I would love to do that.
Okay, and for those that may not have followed what Milo was saying, he wasn't insulting me. He was being self-deprecating because someone goes, Milo insulted you and said you're not this intellectual. No, he was being self-deprecating. But anyway, just remember, I didn't bring up the Protestant Catholic thing. All right, so we've got 4 minutes and change, and Milo, what I'm glad to see is that despite everything you've gone through, you are not just fuming bitterness, and you were not just in a pity party. You're just all the more determined to get a message out. So 4 minutes, if we focus on abortion, radical feminism, why is this ultimately the life and death issue for the nation?
Well, we mentioned earlier in the show about it being ultimately boiling down to whether or not you think that other people have intrinsic moral worth and value, right? Now, the behavior of the feminists, of the social justice warriors, and all the rest of it comes from their own brokenness and sociopathy, comes from their own, bitterness and hatred and self-loathing and all the rest of it. It's very much like the world. They feel the world has hurt them, so they want to hurt it back. And what the cancer that's eating away at the heart of the American public life is it's a particular kind of female sociopathy. It's the kind of like, I can switch my brain off and wander into Planned Parenthood kind of sociopathy. As journalism becomes feminized, and as these industries become, if you look at the industry, if you look at the industries that are completely female dominated already, like publishing, everyone who works in publishing is a woman. There are almost no heterosexual men working at Simon & Schuster, for instance. These are the places where that rot has really not just set in, but eaten the entire business out. And that's why they're all insolvent and why the books they publish are so awful. This sort of mean, vindictive sociopathy of the sort of feminist social justice left is really, it's at the heart of everything that's ugly and horrible. The censorship on social media, it's men like debates. You just challenged me to one. I accepted immediately, in the full knowledge that I will probably be outmatched, but loving the prospect of it and relishing the idea because I know that I'll learn something and I'll enjoy the thing. Women don't typically like that. So they don't like confrontation, they don't like conflict, and they tend not to deal very well with it when it arrives. And this is why at schools, coursework is now being overemphasized rather than exams, because men kind of like those moments of high pressure and women don't. The censorship on social media comes from the platforms becoming feminized and turning into, this sort of domain of women where conflict and disagreement is violence, all this kind of stuff. This is the feminization of society, the loss of the idea of these heroic masculine virtues. Abortion is at the heart of all of this, because if you are able to do that to a life inside you, able to do that to a baby, it stems from the point of view of holding the belief that other people don't have value and don't have worth, or don't have the same degree of worth that you do. Or if you have no idea of your self-worth or self-confidence or value of yourself, how can anybody else be worth anything either when I feel so terrible? This is at the heart, this is at the root of leftism, and particularly the sort of feminist cultural leftism that we're all fighting against. And it's what's destroyed these industries. It's what's destroyed the press and publishing. It's what's destroying social media and Silicon Valley. And it comes from, at its heart, not seeing other people as human beings. And that's why it sounded like I was going off on a tangent then, but that's what I'm getting
Yeah,
at.
yeah.
Not seeing other people as human beings, not and the loss of empathy and understanding and sympathy and and humility and just the loss of humanity that ultimately comes from not recognizing that other people are people too,
Yeah,
and
the
that we're all
least of
created
these.
equal.
Yeah.
That we're all people created in the image of God, and we're all worth something. The left doesn't believe that. This is why the communism uses people instrumentally, versus on the right, where we typically have more of a focus on individualism because we respect the uniqueness and the potential and the extraordinariness of every one individual person, whereas these collectivist ideologies just treat people sort of, as I say, instrumentally.
All right, I gotta jump in, friends. Dangerous.com. By the way, we're both branded Dangerous, but you've got the website dangerous.com. I look forward to continuing discussion with Milo. Thanks for joining us today, man. I appreciate it.
It's been so much fun. Thank you for having me. I'll talk to you soon.